Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, where today you join me for a very exciting one because I've been really looking forward to riding and reviewing this, the Harley-Davidson Sportster S. I mean, in the big picture, of course, it's a very important bike for Harley because it marks a massive change in the Sportster lineup. Far more techy, far more performance based, far more revvy. But look, on a personal note, I just love riding cool looking, rowdy motorcycles, and so yeah, it has been a good day. But on the road, did it live up to expectations, or was I left a little disappointed? Well, in this video, we'll go over all of the main categories in which you'd evaluate a motorcycle, and at the end, I'll give you my verdict. Before we get started, a massive thanks to Barry and the team here at Cardiff Harley-Davidson. I actually had a Sportster S press bike lined up with Harley, but then they said a few of the bikes got damaged by other journalists on the press launch, and so there wasn't a bike left for me. Thing is, I knew I could count on the guys here to hook me up, and they're super kind, super accommodating, and look, they'll be exactly the same with you if you want to do a demo ride on this exact bike. So of course, if you're local or you fancy traveling down here, just hit the link in the description and I'm sure they'll help you out. So let's start with the beating heart of any motorcycle, the engine. Now it might look familiar, it's the same Revolution Max 1250 as the Pan America, although this one gets a T at the end, so it's the 1250T. So it's a 1252cc liquid cooled 60-degree V-twin, but that T at the end of the 1250 there stands for torque. An adventure bike like the Pan America, you might be riding two up with luggage on the motorway, and you might want to bang down a gear and really get into that peak power range so you can perform a quick overtake. This bike though, it's really built for cruising and back roads and tearing up city streets, and so they've taken the peak torque and shifted it further down into the middle of the rev range to make it more usable and accessible. I mean, it is still 122 horsepower, so even in fifth up at like 70 and beyond, give it some throttle and it will definitely still go. But I just really like the mid-rangey liveliness of this bike. I've done a varied route this morning. There's some country roads, a little bit of town work, and then some A roads and 3-lane roads and that kind of thing. And honestly, it's very flexible at road speeds in a variety of situations. It's very lively, and I've got to say, I just had loads of fun. Nice light clutch action, gearbox feels light and accurate. And generally the engine is very smooth. It feels much more in line with modern V-twins like the KTM 1290 or something like that than it does with the other bigger Milwaukee 8 engines. In terms of downsides, I mean, the tank's a little bit small. It's under 12 litres, so at 5.1 litres per 100 kilometres, you're going to get realistically 150 miles if you nurse it a bit. It shouldn't be a massive problem for this style of bike, but it doesn't have the hugest range. And then the other thing is just this big exhaust. I mean, it certainly looks cool, but it is super restrictive. Not specific to Harley, not necessarily their fault, it's just the way that things are at the moment with emissions regulations. But I think just especially on a bike that looks like this, that you know it's a Harley, that you know it's a big 1250 V-twin, it has so much potential to sound awesome, and so first mod I think would be not necessarily something super loud, but certainly something a bit louder than this. Those two things aside though, I really do think it is a cracking engine, and just that little change to pull the torque down a bit, yeah, it really does work for me and really produces a lot of fun on the road. And now the other area that it feels like they've put a lot of effort into with this bike is the handling. Four main things I think that stand out to me with this bike. Firstly, as soon as you get on it, you'll notice the weight is far lighter than any Harley cruiser style bike that I've tried before. So 238 kilograms, and that's in running order, so fully oiled and fueled up. It feels small and nimble and agile and perfect for more sporty riding. Secondly, the suspension, you've got a 43mm upside down fork, a piggyback reservoir monoshock at the rear, and front and rear there's plenty of adjustability. I think it's fully adjustable actually, so rebound, compression and preload, and you get a remote preload knob on the rear, although you're probably not realistically going to be taking a passenger. I mean, there is a passenger seat accessory, but clearly there are better bikes for that. Now the guys here at Cardiff Harley were saying that when the bike arrived it was fully backed off and fairly soft and, you know, a little bit more comfort focused, but what they've done is set it up for firstly a variety of customers with it being a demo bike, but secondly, you know, a balance of handling and comfort. And I will say it does feel quite firm. I'm used to their cruisers, like I say, being much heavier, much softer and no adjustability, so I like the fact that this firstly is firmer, but also you can either dial it into your weight and riding style, or if you just want a day where you fancy a little bit more cushiness, you've got that option. On the road it really does feel much closer to modern European and Japanese naked bikes. I mean, it's still a cruiser, but in terms of the way it rides and that firmness and accuracy, it feels a lot closer than anything I've experienced from Harley so far. Same could be said, number 3, for the brakes. So you've got a single 4-pot radially mounted Brembo caliper at the front there, and then a single pot Brembo at the rear. Now in terms of braking power, it's not huge. Certainly bikes with twin discs and bigger discs are going to feel more powerful on the brakes, but for this kind of bike, a cruiser, I think it's more than ample and certainly enough to feel like reassured that it's going to stop. But what I did think was excellent, and I think it's as a result of the Brembo radial master cylinder, is the initial sort of feel and bite, and actually the feel all the way through the lever stroke. A radial master cylinder like that should give you more feel and crispness than a regular axial master cylinder, and I think that's the difference with this bike. Now the fourth thing to say about this bike is that despite all of those performance improvements and handling improvements, look, it still is very much set up like a cruiser. It's low, it's long, the head angle is relaxed, and on top of that you've got this massive front tyre, so 160mm wide. Wider than the rear tyres on a lot of bikes, and look, it's not bad. It really does still feel agile around town and doing tight turns and in the car park here, but clearly a bike that's raked out like that for stability is going to need a little bit more effort on the bars just to get it to tip in. Same goes for that front tyre, and so I think the way to sum it up is, look, if you're coming from a different Harley, another Harley or cruiser, this might feel lively and accurate and light and agile. If you're coming from like a sporty naked bike, I think it'll still surprise you with how good it is, but a cruiser with a big front tyre like that, and I mean big, and then also the cruiser geometry, are always going to feel a little less sharp than that category of bike. Now there is a little bit of compromise with the handling, and that's in terms of comfort. It's certainly not the most cushy and distance orientated bike in the Harley lineup. Travel on the fork is pretty short, but certainly on the shock, yeah, it's on the modest side, let's say. Does it matter for a bike like this? Well, it is a sporty cruiser, so you're not really going to be buying this to crank out loads of motorway miles, but I think if I bought it, I'd fit the accessory mid-position foot pegs. These forward controls come as standard, and combined with the thin padding on the seat, really you've got a lot of weight over the back, not a great deal of travel, not a great deal of padding here, and so when you find yourself going over potholes and rougher surfaces, you do want to lift your bum off the saddle a bit. It's difficult to do that with forward foot control. It's always going to be difficult to do that with the forward controls, so some mid controls around here, for our roads at least, I think those would be preferable for me. But bar position, excellent. I really like this. I don't like big, high or mini apes like that. Too low and you'd be nearly touching your toes. This just suits the character of the bike perfectly, you know. You can cruise a bit, but also drop your elbows, and it does feel kind of sporty. Heated grips as an accessory. There's a windscreen as an accessory. Like I say, you can get a pillion seat and backrest. So yeah, there are some ways to make it a little more comfort orientated, but really it sets out to do a job, and that job is not to be a rolling sofa. Now in terms of tech and features, this is a category that I'm used to glossing over with the Harley cruisers, but this one couldn't be any more different. Like I say, it's got a lot in common with the Pan America, and that's a really fully featured adventure bike, and so most of that tech gets carried over here, and it really does make for something that's a massive step above anything else I've ridden in their cruiser lineup, and to be honest, most of the competition don't even come close. Indian Scout, Triumph Bobber, those sorts of bikes are really stripped back, but this really does get a lot of features. So you get a 4-inch TFT display. It's round, so it looks in keeping with the rest of the bike, but it gets the innards and interfaces and menus that are very similar to the Pan America. Also with Bluetooth connectivity, so you can connect to a headset, your phone, turn-by-turn nav, media playback, and even voice command. There's a dedicated button here for Siri and that sort of thing. 3 standard riding modes of rain, road, and Sport. I found Sport a little bit too choppy this morning, so for me, road was preferable, right in the middle. But if you want to dial it into your own preference, there's some custom slots as well where you can affect all the different parameters and just get it perfectly set up. Rider aids are lean sensitive, so ABS and traction control are powered by the IMU. Cruise control is standard, LED lighting all round. It's just really good in terms of tech. Surprised to say it. But look, tech and specs and features and performance and adjustments and settings, all that stuff aside, realistically you're going to buy a bike like this because it floats your boat a bit. And look, in terms of desirability, I think this is really up there with the best looking bikes this year. And I know that might be controversial, it's a bit of a polarizing design, but I'm definitely in the love category. It's just so low slung and sleek and stealthy looking. The big chunky wheels are almost like caricatured, especially the front, but it really does give it some proper attitude. The high pipes and the sort of tail end here with the single seat is a bit flat tracker looking. I like that. I think it works with this bike. And then similar to a lot of the more recent Harleys like the Fat Bob or the Pan America, I personally really like this more muted and stealthy sort of choice of finish rather than something shiny and chrome. So a lot of matte and brushed natural metal there and black and bronze. I think it looks refined and smart, but still aggressive. But as I always say, this is somewhat subjective, so let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. Now last up, the price, and this comes in at $13,995 and then 250 quid more for anything other than the black finish. And I think, I mean, compared to the rest of the Harley lineup, it looks like incredible value, especially when you consider all the features and adjustability and tech and that extra top-end performance. As for how it stacks up to the competition, I mean, it's got a lot more spec and features than the Triumph Bobber and the Indian Scout. Those are simple, basic cruisers. This feels much more in line with the Indian FTR, you know, the flat tracker. Similar dash, similar rider aids, similar power, similar torque. It's just that one's more upright and flat tracky, and this one is more of a cruiser position. But look, in terms of value for money and is this price right against the market, it looks pretty good. And so with that, was I disappointed or was I delighted by the Sportster S? Well, honestly, the engine was a standout feature for me. When you get on the gas, it really does shift. Like I say, handling's great. It is a little on the firm side, but tech-wise as well and price-wise, yeah, I mean, especially for a cruiser type bike, it's good.